sports there, as it is at the RSC, where Waterford are taking on Cork City. Much change. Cork City 10 changes, in fact, from Friday night's win over Bohemians. Just Jimmy Johan surviving the cold there. Still scoreless there. Waterford 0 and Cork City 0, with the winners to play Sligo Rovers in the next round of the EA Sports Cup. Wes Houlihan says it's time to move on after announcing he's to leave Norwich City. The former Republic of Ireland playmaker made 351 appearances for the Championship club since moving from Blackpool in 2008. Norwich today called him a club legend, and they'll grant him a testimonial at the end of the campaign. His final game will be against Leeds this coming weekend. Leinster say any move from the province involving Joey Carberry or Ross Byrne will be down to the player. Reported, of course, over the weekend that one of the understudies to Jonathan Sexton will be heading to Ulster at the insistence of the IRFU. Sean O'Brien, meanwhile, says he's glad he's been afforded the time to recover from a shoulder injury. The flanker will miss the rest of the season, and including that Champions Cup final with Racing after undergoing surgery last Friday. O'Brien says he's been fighting his own body both physically and mentally this season. Fergus McFadden is a doubt for that Champions Cup final as well. He's definitely out of Saturday's Pro 14 trip to Connacht. That's having sustained a hamstring injury in the win over the Scarlets. It's believed the GAA finally has written to each and every county secretary to remind them of the association's impartial stance. On Saturday, a group including Tyrone manager Mickey Hart led a meeting at Ballyfermot GAA club calling for a no vote in the upcoming referendum on the 8th Amendment. The GAA has reaffirmed it will not be taking a position or commenting on the matter.
Any early thoughts on the first 9 minutes at Goodison, Kev? This is an end of season 9th versus 10th match.
It's actually a decent enough tempo to the game. Everton have started well. There was a decent chance for Cenk Tosun. He's had the best one of the game. So Theo Walcott had a decent run into the penalty area. But Newcastle are sitting in. They're sitting a little bit deep, trying to hit Everton on the break. Coleman and Baines are playing high as two fullbacks. And that's maybe with Newcastle's way. It is actually a decent start. There's a decent tempo to the game. So I was looking at the weekend at Palace and Watford, and the game was just dreadful. But I understand it maybe from Palace's perspective, because a point actually, as it turned out, was a decent one for them. With this, they can both go out and express themselves and go and play tonight.
I was going to say, were they maybe a touch more enjoyable than early season games? You're both safe. There's nothing to play for, or were you almost wishing the season away?
There's a bit of that sometimes when there's something riding on it. You know, you're actually, of course, you're more fired up for it. It's only natural. But in these games, you know, if I'm thinking back some of the games I would have played in at various clubs would have been out, this type of game was actually decent. You just go out and express yourself, go and play, get on the ball, go and play, and there's no real pressure to do certain things, really.
Okay. A couple of signs, by the way, at Goodison Park as well tonight in relation to the survey regarding Sam Allardyce and the management. Our survey says, get out of our club. There's a couple of ones that are doing the rounds there.
Really,
so
Right.
Their views are not on the fence.
Okay, we'll talk rugby.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
As you know, at this stage we have ourselves a Leinster Racing 92 Champions Cup final in Bilbao next month to look forward to. Sunday the 12th of May, Saturday the 12th of May rather, is when that's on in Bilbao. Leinster too good for Scarlets on Saturday in Dublin, 38 points to 16, and Munster did put a bit of a sheen on the scoreboard against Racing in the second half, but really that game felt over after 21 minutes of the game. They were down 27 points to 3 after 42 minutes. Racing didn't score again, and it finished up 27 points to 22. Eddie O'Sullivan is on the line. Evening, Eddie.
Evening, Joe.
I don't think either Leinster or Racing would have expected to be so comfortable at half-time. None of us did, really.
No, I think the games were over at half-time, really, which is, for showpiece games like that, it's a pity. You'd like those games going on to the wire, but yeah, both games were salted away. I thought Racing didn't play at all in the second half. They just kind of really slowed the game down. There was nothing like the intensity or the expression they had in the first half when they had the ball. And it kind of became a damn squib at the end. I know Munster got a few tries at the end, which kind of livened things up, but at the same time, you could never see him coming back, you know. And from a showcase point of view, it was disappointing for the spectators, but I guess Racing supporters and Leinster supporters won't complain.
No, not overly. 9 tries conceded in 7 Champions Cup games was one of the stats of Munster's pre-game, which was being talked about. Their defence had been very organised and very solid. And so none of us expected after 22 minutes that Teddy Thomas would be literally throwing away a hat-trick to Machino, which was a strange kind of a moment. What happened Munster defensively? How were they suddenly so porous in those opening 25 minutes?
I think it was a combination of factors. I think they were losing the collisions at the contact area. Racing were making good yardage on every carry, and the ball was very quick, which means you're going to not get off the line as aggressively. So that meant they had to push more laterally into a drift defence, and then the drift defended very poorly. They got beaten on the inside shoulders and they missed a lot of tackles, which is, I think they missed in the region of something like 18 tackles or something like that, which is crazy considering they didn't have that many to make. They had only I think 80 tackles to make, and they missed 15 or 16 of those. So, it was just missed tackles by just poor drift defending. Probably, kind of a completely different than the way they played against Toulon, where the defence was ultra aggressive, knowing that they had to shut down the Toulon midfield. This was very passive, and they just got cut apart in the outside channels when their shoulders were turned to the touchline, and there was some uncharacteristic missed tackles from players. It was like they were a bit overawed or a bit overcome by the occasion, but it's hard to believe because there's enough experience in that Munster team.
Yeah.
But it was a very poor defensive display, and for that reason I think they were behind the 8 ball before they knew what hit them.
We just had Keith Earls, we just played him out there to the listeners. He was in earlier on this afternoon to record an interview, and he said something which has kind of just struck me since actually thinking about talking to you subsequently. And he said we were very aware in our build-up that they tended to struggle as games went on, that really they would be at their most dangerous, and have been all season, in that first 20-minute spell. And I just wondered, the more I think about it, that psychologically in some respects, did that maybe infect them a little bit and feed into the passive approach in some respects in that first 20, that they didn't actually go out to try and win the game in that first 20 and almost stood off them a little bit and waited to see how things would transpire. I appreciate there are a million different reasons they lost the game, but it was an interesting point that Earls made. They were aware that the first 20 against Racing would be the toughest.
Yeah, and I can see where you're coming from in terms of they might have went out to contain Racing in that first 20 rather than go after them, and the containment plan didn't work for sure. But having said that, you would have thought that if you expect the team to come at you in the first 20, the most important thing is you get off the defensive line and you start smashing people and, fight for every blade of grass and give them no momentum and make your tackles. And that was in abundance against Toulon, and though they dodged a few bullets against Toulon, they fought for that. And that wasn't evident in the first 20 minutes. It was like they were standing off Racing and letting them play their game. So I suppose if the plan was to contain them, they certainly didn't do that. They didn't get off the line. And I would have thought that would be their primary goal in containing a team who you felt were going to run at you in the first 20. I think it's a reasonable suggestion that if Munster were in the game as it got into the last 20, they would have probably had a bit of edge on the fitness front. We tend to have that edge on the French teams. Although Racing are probably fitter than most French teams, it's still something you could probably depend on when into the last 20 if there's a tight game that we could see them off. But obviously the last 20 the game was over. But I think that it's interesting to say that containment plan, if that was a strategy, didn't work. If you're going to contain teams, you've got to do something about it. It's not about waiting to see what they do. It's not letting them do anything. And that means much more aggressive and more suffocating on your defence, and Munster were the complete opposite.
The line-out completely malfunctioned as well. And then going forward, what did you make of Munster going forward? It's hard to put too much stock in those tries as the game went on. Like, what was their plan from what you could see to try and break down Racing?
Well, it was interesting during the week listening to Van Grant talking about, in his interview, he said that, at this stage of the season you don't change too much, you just tinker with things. And that struck me as a risky strategy in a sense, because I think when you look at Munster, they have, again, done very well this season. Take Sunday or yesterday out of it, they've had a good season. But they were going into a heavyweight boxing competition against Racing 92. They won in Limerick against Toulon, but to be fair, there was an element of luck in winning that game. And they did a lot of things well, but it still came down to an element of luck. I think against Racing, they needed to change it up and do something different that Racing wouldn't expect. And they went in with practically the same game plan they've had. I mean, in the second half, they ran the same start to play they ran against them in Cowan Park, which was pretty successful. But you'd think that they would have to throw some sort of a curveball at Racing to get them off guard and upset them. And the fact that he laid out his cards early week about not changing too much, not just tinkering around the edges, it struck me as that they weren't prepared to try and take Racing out of their comfort zone. They were going to do what they did all season. And the problem with that is when you play a team like Racing, or a heavy hitting team like some of the French teams are, you're almost not asking them any difficult questions. They know what you do, and then you're not throwing any curveballs at them. I think you've got to think a little bit outside the box. So I think they were a bit conservative in that And that showed then in their attack. They were losing collisions. They were very narrow. And when they were trying to go wide, they were under so much pressure. They were putting the ball on the ground. And they looked really like lost for ideas. And I think Keighley's attempted drop goal, which was hit a Racing player in the chest, was kind of at that point of the mission that they just didn't know what they were trying to do at that stage.
Yeah.
And you couldn't see where they were going to dig a try from. And it proved that way for most of the game. That 10 minutes fell before half-time where they couldn't score. The half ended with a turnover 5 minutes from the Racing line. And then they really did dominate, the second half in terms of territory and possession, and they couldn't score. And ironically, their best moments were Zebo on the field, who didn't make the team. I thought, I just questioned that all week. I thought, putting him on at 43 minutes previous to an admission, that he should have been on to start.
See, maybe again, I don't want to overread into what Keith Earls told us tonight, but maybe if the plan in Van Graan's head is, well, let's weather the first 25, 30, 40 minutes, then you're thinking Simon Zebo's a lovely fella to throw off the bench rather than almost, he's probably coming back from an injury, he mightn't be able to last the full 80. Let's use his best 20, 30, 40 minutes towards the end. And obviously when you're that far behind, it feels a bit pointless, but maybe that was the thinking. Just to skip on a second, I know you're... Go on.
Just part of that, weathering the storm is about playing as well,
Yeah, of course.
About throwing stuff at them, going after them. Let's see how they defend.
Yeah, I just wonder, maybe they were overly wary and cautious of containing Racing. Who knows?
Well,
I don't want to overread into the Earl's comments,
It looked that way when you look at the first 20 minutes, because they were kind of more like spectators at the game for the first 20 minutes, and then it was over,
Yeah, it certainly felt like that. So you mentioned Keighley's attempted drop goal there. It was interesting. Brian O'Driscoll was on the morning show this morning, and maybe he was talking about their number 10 situation, and maybe it ties in with a wider question, which I'll put to you after we hear from Brian O'Driscoll, about whether or not this group have just maxed out and this is their level, and if they want to take the next step they need new players, because certainly number 10 was a position where Brian this morning felt they needed to strengthen.
Keighley has been solid this season, better than other years, but yet is that enough to go and win Europe?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure. So maybe, in Munster, when Ian Madigan was leaving, Munster supporters were shouting from the rooftops, we'll take him gladly. Why is he leaving Leinster to go further afield? So whether there's a spot for him to come back into one of the provincial teams, I know that he's on big money over in Bristol, and whether the RFU is willing to pony up that sort of money or not will remain to be seen. But there are plenty of good 10s to go around. I just don't know whether we're willing to hand any of ours over.
There's that we again.
That was Brian as part of the wider discussion about the Carberry-Ross Byrne situation, which we might come on to in a second. But certainly Keighley's failings there came up. And I not to make it all about Keighley, because you just look at that team as a whole, that squad as a whole, Eddie, and maybe in some respects they've actually just done very, very well to get to a semi-final and should be applauded, because they've clearly put in a hard season's work to do that. And it's 2 years in a row now where they've been comprehensively outclassed at the semi-final stage. Maybe there does come a point where it's just about the quality of player that you have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. It's not a bad Munster team, but it's a Munster team that's probably punching at its weight at the moment. And that's why you said I felt they needed to do something different against a team like Racing on the big day out. I would agree with Brian that Keighley has had a really good season, but I think his temperament on the big occasion is questionable, and that's maybe a harsh thing to say. But look, that's his history. Like, he did not have a good game yesterday, and I think he needed to have a very good game. But all the indicators were he was in a good place. But it was a big game, big occasion, huge pressure, and I suppose what didn't help him. And I'm a huge fan of Conor Murray's, but again, I thought yesterday he looked a little bit off for him. Even in defence, he missed a couple of tackles and stuff that wouldn't be his form. So that didn't help Keighley, but he certainly didn't run the game. And then you need on the big day like that someone who just grabs the game by the scruff of the neck, and Keighley didn't do that. And the question is, will he be ever able to do that at that level? But I think there is a case for that position. They have to look seriously at that position. I think as well, like Glendale was the guy they were probably looking at, but he's been in terms of injuries, he's had a catastrophic run. And will he ever come back from the injuries he's had? We don't know. So it is certainly an area for them that without someone who's going to step up to the plate on those big occasions, and you know it's going to happen, and they're going to deliver, like Rod used to, like Sexton does, then there is that probably nervousness around the team on the big occasion. And if that goes wrong in those precincts, then it's very hard to come back from it.
And if they manage to get sorted at 10 and get someone approaching world class at 10, are there other big issues around that team? Like in a glib way, you could ask, beyond Murray and Earls, who might get into the Leinster starting 15 if that's the current level? Not many.
They're not far off.
Okay.
They're not far off, I think, as a team. But I do think they need to find someone to replace Zebo, because Zebo was their X factor and he's gone now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big hole to fill. And I mean, I think, Andrew Conway is a great player, but I don't think he's a fullback of the calibre of Zebo. And that's just my take on it. I mean, people might disagree with that, and I think he's an excellent player. Conway, he's a very good player and he can play fullback, but Zebo has got that X factor and he's gone now. So they need a 10 and they probably need a 15 who can make stuff happen in the backfield for them. The pack is pretty okay. They're no world beaters, but they're very solid. And I just think that, Munster need to find different ways of playing the game. This has been a bit of a bugbear for them, is when they meet big teams who can match them physically and eyeball them down in the contact area, they struggle. And they need to start working towards, different strategies against different teams. There are certain teams Munster can beat up, and they can beat up most teams they meet on most weekends in the Pro 14. They have the horses for that. But when you get up into that rarefied air of European competition, the teams you meet are not going to get bullied very easily. That's why they're there. And I just think they need to think a little bit outside the box, and I think there was none of that yesterday in their attacking game plan. There was no intention of doing that. And I think they have to start looking at that. I mean, Felix Jones is their attack coach. He's a very smart guy. I've been very impressed with some of the stuff Munster tried to do. But they probably have to think a bit wider as well outside that. And they need a 10, they need a 15, and they need to develop their attacking game plan. And the other one is that their defence was poor yesterday. Why did that happen, or how did that happen? Who's in charge of defence now? I think that they've lost the defence coach, and they don't seem to have made a formal replacement. So somebody is running that department at the moment, and maybe it's Van Grant himself. But that didn't fire well, and it was in trouble against Toulon, and they got lucky. Toulon had him on the spit a couple of times and made a mistake.
Yeah.
So that's something that's not going to go away once they get into the business end of the season again. They'll be fine throughout the season. It's a good Munster team, but there's a few parts there that aren't wired properly, and they need to get on it if they're going to take that big next step. And it's a big step to take. It's not easy to take it, but to give themselves a shot, they need to do that.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. There will be a Tipperary man lining up against Leinster in Bilbao. Donnacha Ryan made 19 tackles yesterday, missed none of them, was involved in lineouts and rucks, and was just in general good health, 34 years old. And afterwards, just because it is worth touching on the Donnacha Ryan side of this, he spoke to Dave McIntyre, who was there.
Donna, congratulations. Are there mixed feelings, or is it 100% satisfaction at having made a final?
A bit bittersweet, really. I really do feel for lads. Like, they've been knocking on the door, like last year and this year, and obviously 2 years ago was very tough. So they're building really, really well, and a great unit there playing together. Obviously, I'm thrilled the best to be able to be back in a final. But I do feel for the lads.
Obviously, the win built on that first 24 minutes, 3 tries, some brilliant rugby, and the game was done. That's what the win was built on. I mean, had you anticipated such a quick start, or is that just the way it panned out for you?
We trained really hard the last 4 days in a row. Probably wouldn't think it was the best management of how we'd approach it, but we came out all guns blazing, and I think they kind of maybe shocked the Munster boys a bit, and we were able to get a bit of parity in the scrum. I think the last 5 minutes of the first half, really, when we hung on, was a big momentum swing for us as well. And in the second half, Munster had to pass the ball, chase the game, and we were able to put them under pressure a bit. And I think we were lucky in some aspects in the second half, but definitely a lot of things for us to work on.
Is there a huge amount of satisfaction in that you spent the first half with the ball and excelled as a team, and spent pretty much all of the second half without the ball and excelled defensively? Like, it was a very complete performance.
I personally wouldn't think it was the most complete performance. I think we lost the ball in contact 3 times, but we didn't have to. Lads trying to do offloads, but I suppose that's French/Fijian way. Sometimes you want to play it out of contact. But look, and in cup rugby you can't really afford to do that. Otherwise, teams are going to cut you to pieces. But I think, look, we had massive momentum swingers with Maxi Mashno, massive on the post there in the second half as well. Big momentum swingers, and look, we're just really delighted to get the win. And like we saw Leinster play yesterday against Scarlets, and they absolutely did a demolition job of them. And look, they're going to be very, very hard to beat, but they're obviously going to be favourites going to the final. It's because they haven't lost a game all season. But look, we're just delighted to be there.
It was such a frustrating start of the season for you. You had to wait so long for your racing debut, and in a really short space of time, you've grown into this leadership role within this racing pack. Are you surprised at how quickly the settling in period has been? At the start, I really want to make a big impression. I had a fantastic surgeon, came back from a neck fusion after 10 weeks. He's over there again. He's a lovely guy. And I was really mad to make an impression, and just trying to fly the flag for any Irish fellas coming over to France and make the reputation of how good the Irish players work hard and how hard they work. And to be honest, listen, I'm just really trying to make other guys' jobs easier for them, and just do the best I can. I'm not getting any younger, so enjoying the experience as well I can, and really enjoying it at the moment. You were part of the last Munster squad to contest a final, so I would imagine as you got your hands on your winners' medal that day, you thought if someone had told you it'll be 10 years before you get back there again, you hardly would have believed them.
I suppose we had fantastic teams over the years, and it was very frustrating, and it just goes to show how hard it is to get to a final. Obviously, like Munster, the current Munster group of guys there, they're hurting now, but that's a big motivation for them next couple of years, next year to go back and do it again. I really know how hard it is and put so much work and stress into it, and because it means everything really. Because you want to be playing at the top, but I think one thing I've done since I come to France is to really enjoy outside of it. It's definitely, when you're in playing it and in training and stuff, it's great, but making sure to switch off afterwards and enjoy afterwards is important as well, because sometimes rugby can become a bit all-consuming, and that's great in one part, but at the same time, it's at the end of the day, it's sport, So,
fair play, well done.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, good on him. I think everyone's enjoying Donnacha Ryan's season in France. He's doing very well, 34 years old, had a great game yesterday. Eddie, just one last point then to wrap in Munster and get into Leinster before the clock really comes against us. A few texts in, maybe to sum up some thoughts, reaction. Munster were missing a lot of players yesterday, to be fair. Guys on the pitch looked tired though. Don't think the first 20 minutes down to a lack of talent, says Brian in Dublin, and somebody else. Maybe Munster were tired after the South African trip, very soon after long trips, says Mike. And does anyone else think Munster potentially weakened by the after effects of playing at altitude in South Africa, says Jeff. They were so flat, it was inexplicable. Anything in that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
and I think
great.
the South African trip was probably a positive, because it's like a pre-season training camp, warm weather training. They got 2 games under their belt. They won both of them. There's no jet lag issues because you're flying north-south. It's one of those trips that's very doable. Okay. So I thought on the back of that they were going to be in a really good space. So I think the South African thing, Avanton was a plus, but you wouldn't have thought that yesterday for sure. But I wouldn't factor it into why things went wrong for them.
Fair enough. As for Leinster then, very comfortable against the Scarlets. If you're maybe looking at Munster and saying they need to develop a few new ways of playing, Leinster certainly have several cards they can play, and it seemed on Saturday they looked at what Scarlets were throwing at them and they said, right, we're just going to bully you physically, dominate you and go up the middle, and that'll do the job very nicely, and it did. Well,
it was a very smart game plan in the overall strategy or philosophy of it, because the one thing the Scarlets were looking for on the weekend was a loose game where the ball would be thrown around, and there'd be turnovers and there'd be width in the game, and like just one of those games that'd be run and gun, as we call it. Leinster can do that. If they wanted, they can do it, but there'd be a risk in that. So what they did is they played basically Route 1 rugby, and it was ruthlessly efficient, and it was suffocating. I mean, looking at the game, every time Leinster got into the Clonetly 22, there was an inevitability about a score coming. and Kilkenny knew that, and they could do nothing about it. Kilkenny weren't backing off, you know. I mean, people saying, "Oh, Kilkenny didn't show up." Kilkenny showed up, but they were just choked to death. And that's what this Leinster team can do to you. We saw them do it to Exeter this year, who are as about as physical a team as you'll meet in Europe. Exeter are excellent in that capacity, and they've fantastic culture. They train and they play hard. Leinster don't beat them at their own game over in Exeter. So, we know Leinster have this capacity to play whatever way they need to. And I thought it was a very, very efficient performance. And it just shows that Leinster are the best team in Europe. There's no arguing about it at the moment. Look at the notches on their gun, as you say. They've beaten Scarlets, who are the Pro 12 champions. They've beaten Saracens, who are the European champions. They've beaten Exeter, who are the English champions. They've beaten Montpellier, who are top of the top 14.
Glasgow as well.
They've ticked a lot of boxes there, and they've done it comfortably. And I just think at the moment they're going to be right hard favourites of the final, no matter who pitched up, but understandably so. Yeah,
it's probably the most media comment I'll ever make, and you can roll your eyes as you would, but I mean, you look at the talent and they should be thinking about 3 in a row. They're that brilliant. Yeah,
they should, and it could happen, but
I know the odds are against,
slip between cup and lip, but having said that, at the moment they're in a fantastic place. There's a number of things for Leinster that have come together, like the perfect storm in a positive sense. Look, let's be honest, the Lancaster factor is excellent. I mean, himself and Leo seem to work incredibly well together. It's a really smart decision by Leo, and it's paid dividends. And Lancaster plays his part, but Leo plays his part as well. I don't think it takes away from Leo to have Lancaster there. You had the depth and talent coming through, even this year you've got Porter, James Ryan, and then you've got Larmour. The endless supply of players that creates incredible pressure on guys to actually deliver in every game, because there's a guy looking for your shirt. Look at Cian Healy; he's been rejuvenated this year, because he knows he's probably a bad performance away from losing his shirt, because that's the way it is in Leinster. And then you have the overseas influence. I think Nusea has been incredible as a leader. He was huge in the Exeter game at home, and Sexton went off early, and they could see the tries, and he kicked the penalties and got him back in the game and led the team. You've got Fardy, who's been outstanding. Gibson Park, got a bit of an armchair ride in the weekend, but he's another guy who's been very good. And even James Lowe, who didn't play on the weekend because of the mechanics of the overseas players. So the overseas contingent have been very, very positive. And there's a sense of destiny about Leinster at the moment. It's hard to find a weak spot in them. And then you've got Sexton, who, is probably, without arguing too much, one of the best fly-halves in the world, but the kind of guy you want at the helm with a team of that talent, because he bosses everybody. Yeah. There's no stars as far as Sexton's concerned. He'll chew the head off anybody, and that keeps them all grounded. So it's a pretty potent combination, and it's come together at the right time for him. So it's theirs to lose now, which is a lot of pressure on its own. There's a lot of pressure on Leinster now, because they've done so much right this season that were it to go south for any reason, it'd be a bit of a head scratcher and it would set them back. But I think they can only do what they're doing. They just keep building those blocks in the wall, and they're going in the right direction in no uncertain terms.
Yeah, it's fairly phenomenal stuff. Sexton, 18 points yesterday, including the try. Scott Fardy, man of the match. James Ryan still hasn't lost a senior game. He was Leinster's top carrier and joint highest tackler. Robbie Henshaw back 10 weeks after shoulder reconstruction. Gary Ringrose, just all over the place. Really, really strong. And
well, when you consider, Joe, look, yes, they had three. They had Rhys Ruddock missing, they had Josh van der Flair, and they had Sean O'Brien missing. Yeah. And to be fair to all those guys, all internationals, fantastic players, they weren't missed.
Yeah.
Well, they had James Lowe couldn't be put on the team because of the mechanics of the overseas play. He really wasn't missed. Yeah. So, it just shows you the kind of depth they have around the squad, and it's pretty potent stuff. Now, the big talking point now is what's going to happen to Joey Carberry.
Yeah, well, just to bring people, that was exactly where I was going. So their strength and depth may be chipped away at somewhat. It was Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Times yesterday. I'm sure people have seen it at this stage, where he had the exclusive, and it seems Joe Schmidt and the RFU Performance Director David Nusafora, and nobody from the RFU has countered this report in the last 24 hours. They visited Leinster's training centre last Sunday morning and informed Leo Cullen, I'm sure he was delighted, that he needed to make a choice between the two youngsters, Carberry or Ross Byrne, who was staying, who was leaving, who was going to Ulster, and they wanted the choice promptly. The piece said Leinster understood to be furious that Cullen was pressurised like that in the week of a Champions Cup semi-final. How and ever, it says, if Cullen and Lancaster are forced to make a call, it seems they want the call made pretty quickly. They mean business. Peter O'Reilly's sense from whoever his source may have been, or whoever he kind of took a flavour of what's going on from, was that they would probably keep Byrne, seeing as Carbery would be unavailable when Sexton's also unavailable for the international breaks, and they trust Byrne and they see him as a reliable pair of hands when Sexton is away. So Carbery to Ulster potentially is the choice that Leo Cullen will have to make. Don't think either player particularly wants to go. That's very understandable considering where both provinces are at. I definitely want your opinion, and I don't know if you've had any involvement as Irish coach at this level of moving players around. Just to give you a flavour of what different people have been saying the last 24 hours, Brian O'Driscoll was on the morning show, as I mentioned earlier. Here was his take on the situation.
So likewise with a Carbery or I think it's more likely to be a Ross Byrne who'll want to go and get more game time. That is, if Carbery is used a little bit more often at 10, Joe Schmidt has to be pulling his hair out that Carbery's only had one outing for Leinster, starting in the number 10 jersey, and he's his backup number 10. That's not ideal. So someone's going to move, and probably quite soon, just to get game time, because you can't have 3 quality operators at 10.
I would say no if I was the 2 lads. No, not going.
Yeah, but it's a tough one, it is, because I would too, because there's a good chance you're going to be winning medals, or you're going to be in the hunt for winning medals. At the moment, the Ulster are a while away from that.
Isn't the coaching better? Like, I have a coaching ticket here which has...
That's the other thing. So a young player...
How am I actually going to get better?
Yeah, so they don't know, not knowing what's going to happen up in Ulster, who's going to come in, am I going to improve as a player? Whatever about playing more often, what skills, what am I being taught on a week-to-week basis? So, yeah, I wouldn't be in a rush at the moment. Certainly, that wouldn't be my first port of call.
So that was Brian this morning. You can watch back that full interview in the usual places on OTBAM. And then Andrew Dunne was in yesterday. Brian was certainly looking at it there from the player's point of view. Andrew Dunne was absolutely looking at it from Leinster's point of view, and he was pretty clear how he felt about the whole thing.
Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster would be pretty outraged.
Furious, yeah.
I would be so annoyed. I mean, I get it. We want best players getting game time, and we all want to push in the right direction and make Irish rugby as great as it can be. But it's like Ulster are getting rewarded, but like by default, for being as bad as they are, as badly run, as badly organised from an executive level. Where are they? Where are their academy players? Why aren't they bringing anyone through? They've plenty of money. I heard an interview during the year, a great interview. I think you did it with Lancaster, and after his English experience, he got the advice of Wayne Bennett, the legendary rugby league coach. He said, whatever your next job is, make sure you really want to do it, and make sure they really want you. And I'm not sure that's the case I would imagine for Carbery or Byrne, that they want to go to Ulster. I strongly doubt it.
Neither want to go.
Yeah, of course they don't. They're in an amazing environment which is really successful, and now they're getting pushed to an environment that on the surface, at the very least, looks a bit toxic at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, who would want to go there right now in their right mind? Particularly if you are involved in what is arguably the best Leinster side in the last 10 years, and certainly the best one in Europe this season. With the greatest of respect to Johnny Sexton, who is without question a phenomenal rugby player.
Love him. We know that.
He is not, his injury profile in the last 2 to 3 years, it's not changing. He's not going to play every game. So if Carbery is gone up to Ulster, what happens if one of them gets a long-term injury? What happens then? Leinster are penalised for developing successful, good players. I get it. I get the whole argument that Carbery, with regular game time at 10 up in Ulster, with you access or exposure to say European games, which he's probably not getting really at 10. Yeah. You can see Schmidt and Nucifor's thinking, but there is one loser in this, and it's Leinster, and everyone else wins. Irish rugby wins, Ulster rugby certainly wins, and Joe and I would imagine Nucifor will probably get their way and win too.
So that's a flavour, Eddie. There's tons of different angles here, be it Leinster's, Ulster's, the players involved, Irish rugby, Nucifor and Schmidt. Where do you want to start? There's a whole heap of options here.
Yeah, first thing I'd say is that I don't know First I'll say is I'm not playing Monday quarterback here. I said this last November after the All Internationals that Carberry, if he was a number 2, is the logical thing was to go somewhere, preferably in South Ireland, where he would get regular rugby at 10. This is going back 5 months, so I'm not. It's nothing new to me.
Yeah.
The thing that surprised me is that there's a choice here, whether it's Carberry or Ross Byrne. I mean, to me, it has to be Carberry from Ireland's point of view. Like, if Ross Byrne goes somewhere else, he's going to get better for sure.
Yeah.
But Carberry's still going to be playing number 2 to Jonathan Sexton, and Carberry still won't get as many games at 10 that he needs to be the number 2 fly half for Ireland.
Yeah, and nothing at European level either.
Very clear that Joey Carberry is his number 2 pick, and quite understandable. He's an excellent player.
Yeah.
So I don't know why there's even a choice, but there is a choice for some reason. But if it doesn't make any sense then for Ross Byrne to go somewhere else. Yeah, he'll get better, but Joey Carberry won't be any better off. He might get a few more games, but he won't be really any better off, because what you want is your guy starting in the European games, the big European games, and so that's a bit surprising. It's completely understood. Listen to Andy there. I agree with him. From a Leinster perspective, it's a lose-lose, because these guys are excellent players. They've come through Leinster, and from them, why would you want to leave Leinster? Leinster is the place to be. If you're a young player at the moment, it's the perfect environment. Like, you're playing with a fantastic squad. Everything's going well. Like, it's going to be, a silverware every year at the way things are going, as it stands. So why would you want to go somewhere else where you may not win silverware? It's going to be a much tougher weekly job. So it's understandable why they don't want to go. But here's the thing, as it always is, this is all about the Irish rugby team. This is what it's all about. This is where we always come back to. This is the genesis of all the big decisions on Irish rugby. It's what's best for the Irish rugby team, because the Irish rugby team brings in the vast majority of the finances for the Irish Rugby Football Union. And all decisions are strategically based on what's best for Ireland. And I agree with Dunne. It's a lose for Leinster, but I think the RFU will get their way. But it only makes sense if Joey Carberry is the way that moves, because if he stays behind Sexton, it doesn't make any sense. Unless Ross Byrne is going to be the number 2 for Ireland, which he isn't at the moment, to be fair. He's not. It doesn't say he won't be there in some time.
Yeah, that is a surprising aspect to it. You wonder why they've given them a choice, because Leinster are not going to feel great about it either way, and so the choice does seem strange.
I mean, probably for Leinster, Joe, it would be better for Leinster. The best of a bad choice would be to hold Carberry, because he can play 15 and 10.
Yeah.
Where Ross Byrne is pretty much a 10, and he's quite, at this point, inexperienced, although he's made phenomenal progress, and he'll be good wherever he goes. He's a very good player. But Leinster would probably have, a better value out of Carberry because of his ability to play in 2 positions. But that's a small point. Yeah. But again, from Ireland's point of view, I don't understand why there is a choice, because it has to be Carberry that goes. And I said this 5 months ago. People are upset by it, but I'm thinking the logic of him, like going to the World Cup with Carberry, who, if he goes on the next 18 months playing behind Sexton, he won't have enough. He won't have his air miles done, as a pilot. If he had to go in to start a quarter final in the World Cup, against whoever, and he's if Sexton goes down in a pool game, so it's a big risk to take.
The logic is clear from
the Irish Rugby Football Union. That's where they're coming from.
One last quick point: is this a slightly new departure? Like, do you remember the RFU, or you as the Irish coach? I don't think there was a performance director necessarily then, but being as aggressive and dictatorial about the situation, moving players that kind of bluntly and saying you've got to pick and we're moving someone and that's that?
Weren't as aggressive, but we certainly had a few discussions with guys. I remember at one stage, Donegal O'Callaghan wasn't getting a lot of game time in Munster at the time. He's behind John Langford and Paul O'Connell. Yeah. And there were suggestions that he might go to Connacht for a season, to give him some, but that didn't materialise. But, he got into the Munster team very soon after. The other one was Eric Miller did leave Leinster and went to Ulster for a while. Just felt he'd get more opportunities. But there was never a big it was more like the player himself wanted to go. He wanted to make a change. He felt he'd get more opportunities. A bit like Jordy Murphy is going to Ulster next year.
Yeah. Because
he wants to. That was more around that kind of dynamics. It was never a case of some provincial director being told this and you've got to shed one of these guys. Which guy you want to shed?
Yeah, where it seems no one wants them to go, including the players themselves.
And I suppose I understand too. If this was brought up this week, it wasn't good timing either. Like I think Leo had enough on his plate this week without having to, wrestle with that problem. But anyway, it obviously didn't bother him. He passed the test yesterday or Saturday with flying colours,
Yeah, they're doing okay. So interesting times. We'll see how that saga plays out. Eddie, thanks a million.
Thanks, Joe.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
Think you've got what it takes to become one of the next Aldi suppliers? Down to Business and Bobby's Late Breakfast on News Talk have teamed up with Aldi in partnership with Board Bia to showcase the best food and drink suppliers Ireland has to offer. Not only will you benefit from a supplier mentoring and development programme, but you'll also have the chance to get your product on the shelves of